This is the Wealth Ability Show with Tom Wheelwright. Way more money, way less taxes.
Welcome to the Wealth Ability Show, where we're always discovering how to make way more money and pay way less taxes. Hi, this is Tom Wheelwright, your host, founder, and CEO of Wealth Ability. So we hear a lot about tenants struggling to pay their rent. What we don't hear a lot about is the landlords. So how do you collect rent in a crisis when tenants are struggling? That's the discussion we're going to have today with my good friend and one of the top foremost real estate experts in the country, if not in the world, Ken McElroy. So Ken, welcome to the show, and thank you for spending a few minutes with us today.
What's happening, Tom? How are you, man?
Doing great, thank you. So Kenny is, I'm going to give a little bit of background. Kenny is a fellow Rich Dad advisor. He's the founder of MC Companies. He's a best-selling author. He's basically my competition on the best-selling author list of Rich Dad advisors, of ABCs of real estate investing, ABCs of property management. A little more prolific writer than I am. Really a tremendous voice in the real estate industry. So Kenny, if you could just give us like 30-second background. I think most people on this call know you, but for the few who don't, who are you?
Hey, thanks, Tom. I appreciate that. So, I started buying real estate, really just out of university. I bought a 2-bedroom, 2-bath condo, used my own money, and then I ran out of money. And, but it did cash flow. And this is way before I met you and Robert Kiyosaki and the Rich Dad advisors and all that. And, but I love the fact, that was my first real estate investment. And I was in property management. So I was managing these properties for all these wealthy people, apartments and commercial and office and all that. And I was like, man, this is a cool business, because of primarily, Tom, what you do. And that is these guys are making all this money and they were paying very little tax. And so I felt like I was in the right seat at that time, learning, the operations. And so about 25 years ago, I decided to do it myself. So I started buying bigger properties and putting together partnerships and syndications and all that. And fast forward, we've got a little over $1 billion worth of real estate now. I've got self-storage, I've got office, we've got 8,000 apartments that we still own today. And we just sold 2,000, as you know, in 2019 at the top of the market. And that's all we do full time. We build them, we buy them, we rent them. We have a management company. We're a general contractor, and we have about 250 employees. We're based in Scottsdale, and I get to travel on the road and write books and talk to you. So I'm a lucky guy.
What could be better than that?
Nothing.
So you've been through this dance before, right? So back in 2008, you had people struggling a little different this time, I think, because this time around, it seems like there's more emphasis from the government on not paying rent. So what do you do? If you would, just share what you guys have done, because I know you've done an outstanding job. Tell us what kind of, how do you keep people paying rent when they're having a tough time feeding their families?
Well, first of all, what I want to say is that this is an issue that is not unlike 2008. The only difference is that this is a virus, and that was a banking crisis. So the economic results were the same. And so we went through this in 2008. We've also been through it in 2001, after 9/11, which was shorter, but it still happened. And so these are things that happen when you own property and you own business. Business gets disrupted, period. And so this just happens to be a virus. And so we've been through this before. And what we do not want to do, Tom, is kick people out, period. The people that we've rented to, they're good people. They have, they have good careers. They're paying their rent on time. We have 8,000 tenants. We have very, very low delinquencies. Very. We hardly evict anyone on a month-to-month basis. It just doesn't happen because you got to screen them correctly in the beginning. So these are folks that enjoy living where they are. They want to rent, and they have good jobs. And so what we do is we just take the approach where we're super proactive, and we contact all the tenants in March. We said, listen, obviously, well, the first thing that we had to do, Tom, is, we're essential business because we're housing. We had to ramp up in a 2-week period with 100 maintenance guys and 100 leasing staff, on how do you collect rent and lease apartments virtually, and then how do you do maintenance, around some of this. And we have some COVID patients that live in our properties, and so we've been on the front line for all this PPE stuff and everything that we're doing there. So that was a massive adjustment. We did all that in the first 2 weeks, and then it was just all about rent collection. And so what happened is, depending on the property, somewhere around 60 to 65% of the people came in and they just paid their rent. They owed what they owed, and their lease was what it was, and they would come in, and these are folks that either had savings, or they were working, or they weren't working, or they were, it didn't really matter. They just came in, no questions asked. And then the second tier was about 20 to 25% of the people came in and said, listen, we need some help. And this is what we were offering. We said, listen, come on in. Just like anything else. Like, let's say somebody goes to the hospital and they have a $2,000 or $3,000 bill from the emergency room. They sit down and they say, listen, I can pay you over 10 months or whatever it is. We do the same thing. And so, we're not collecting fees, and we're not charging them late fees or anything like that. We're just saying, come, let's work with us. Let's work together. We'll figure this out. So, so those two numbers together represented, depending on the property, somewhere between 80 and 90% of our residents. So we felt pretty good, and we were dealing with, say 10 to 15%, and that was all. And those were the people that that everybody's talking about right now in the media. And those are people that basically are just not communicating, and for whatever reason. Now, it might be that they're not even there. So you got to know, as a landlord, we can't just walk into somebody's place. So, there's regulations around that. So we have to post notices and say, is this unit abandoned, for example? And, and then from there, they come in or they don't come in. If they don't come in, you kind of have to assume that it is abandoned, and what you do is you put the notice right over the lock. So the notice is either removed or it isn't removed. If it's removed, it still might be abandoned because they might have went in and pulled other stuff and moved out. But the point is, we're just trying to get people to communicate with us. We don't want to boot anybody out. And then, so you fall into this very last bucket of people that either skipped out or haven't communicated. And that's, for us, that's been a very 8,000 tenants. That's like less than 300 people. So, that's how we got down to this small number. And, and our exposure personally has been pretty low. And the stimulus money that the government gave us, or the employees, I should say, and our tenants was super helpful, because a lot of those people used May, use it to pay May rent. And so for us, it was just a process, just walking through it and managing the numbers.
Well, so it sounds to me like this isn't something that you were able to do just overnight. In other words, it sounds like you did a lot on the front end so that when this crisis happened, that you had better tenants and you had a better relationship with the tenants. If you would, Ken, just talk for a little bit about how do you develop that relationship with tenants where it's not just a vendor buyer type of relationship where, we're really taking care of the place you live in and we care about the way you care about it. How do you do that?
That's a great question. The first thing is putting the right person in there. So like honestly, Tom, let's say you sold your house and you said, you know what, I'm gonna move to San Diego for a year and see if I like it here. You might rent something for a year, and you and Luann might just enjoy the place, and then maybe buy something. So there's people from all walks of life, renting, especially in Scottsdale, and we're in Dallas, Texas, and Austin, and and all these other markets. Some of them are really, really nice. So a lot of these renters it's a choice, not necessarily a necessity. And so, so the front end is who is your tenant base. And so I'll tell you something funny that happened. I was looking at all the collections by project, and I was like, wow, why are these, 3 or 4 or 5 projects, at 99 and 100% collected, in April 1st? It just seems bizarre. And they're like, oh, those are senior properties. and Roth goes,
there you go.
Well, yeah, the casinos are closed, I was laughing, but so tenant mix has a lot to do, and that was the point. Tenant mix has a lot to do with this. And then we had properties in Oklahoma that had mostly service-based and hospitality and, hotels and things like that. And, those people, were in trouble. And so you have, all these tenants and all these people that have all these different scenarios. So that's the first thing. But to answer the second part of your question, we call that resident retention. It's top of mind. We're always, like if you sign a lease June 1st, Tom, we are actually managing you for 12 months. Let's say you sign a 12-month lease. We have what's called touch points, and we're communicating with you. We're asking you questions. We're seeing if you need any maintenance in there. We're saying, hey, we got this stuff going on, and sometimes we're dropping newspapers, and we're doing pastries down at the clubhouses and things like that. We're talking about we bring in fitness people, and so we're creating a community, and so that's all part of resident retention. What we want is we want people when they get to the end of their lease to say, this has been a good experience. We're going to stay. And so the way we do that is by phone, obviously by email, by social media. We try to get all their data. And so, we know everything about, not everything, but we try to get to know everything about everyone so that, we can keep them apprised of what we have going on. And so there's a whole piece on resident retention, which I don't usually talk too much about. But it's all about managing your turnover. So that was already in place. So we had these open lines of communication with the majority of our residents before this even happened.
Right. So you've established a culture there where, people are used to hearing from you. They're used to talking to you. This is not a new thing. And they don't feel like if you're talking to them about their rent, that you're out there to get them.
Right. And we're not. Listen, they pay us. They're our customer. Period. I'm trying to make their experience the best that it can be. And that's my job. And so it's not the other way around. We're not entitled. So this is definitely the other way around. The residents are there. If they don't pay us, then we don't pay the mortgage, and we default on the mortgage. And it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there's no cash flow for our investors. And so we always take the position, our motto in our company, if you take a look at MC companies, it's sharing the good life. And, that goes to our residents, our employees, and our investors. And so, we believe that. And if we can create great cultures on site, there's so many things, Tom. We have contests at our properties. And one of them 3 years ago was an organic garden. We had each property. We gave them a bunch of money. We said, okay, we want you guys to do community gardens and let the residents, plant and pick and do whatever they want in these gardens, and we'll fund it. Those are the kinds of things that we do to try to keep these residents there. We have programs around their kids. We have programs around the elderly. We have programs around health. We have programs around the pools. Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's all a little different now, obviously. But, so we had all that stuff in place. And, if we can reduce the turnover by, just 1%, even though it's significantly more than that, that means we don't have to lease that unit. That means we don't have to turn that unit. That means we don't have to clean that unit. That means we don't have to spend money on the maintenance. So all the, it's thousands of dollars to turn a unit. And so what happens, a lot of the business is people, they rent something and then they're like, okay, great. And then, they don't communicate with them. And then they're surprised when they move, So we take a very proactive approach on all of our residents.
Well, I think you're making a really good point here. And that being a landlord is a business. It's a business. We do talk about it as passive income, but if you're gonna manage it, if you're gonna run it, you are in business, and I love that these are your customers, and communicating with customers is everything when it comes to customers.
Yeah, you do the same thing. I watch you. You do such a great job of educating your folks and teaching and communicating with them. And I look at everyone who pays us as the gold. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And those are the residents. Eventually it makes it to the investor's pocket, but so a lot of people focus on the investors, and not to say that they shouldn't be focused on, because they should. But you got to balance it. It's not about the investors. It's not about the equity. It's about the tenants. And if you can create a great culture and keep the tenants there, and also, these are people. It's a humanitarian issue, period. And it just is. And so, we have to treat people with empathy, and we have to meet them at where they're at. That's it.
I love that. So let's shift gears just for a minute, Ken, and talk about the 300. Okay. So, because for you, it's a small percentage. For some people, some landlords, it's a much bigger percentage. Okay. Yeah. And we do have these new rules under, states. Some states are not allowing eviction, although I'm not sure if you evicted somebody who you're going to get to replace them. That's always been my question. I'm going, why would you evict somebody unless they're a bad tenant, right? I mean, just because they're struggling financially doesn't mean that they're a bad tenant necessarily. But what my question is, so how are you dealing with these new rules and regulations when it comes to not being able to evict, the CARES Act, where you're federally backed, and so you have to forbear on the rents, and in compensation, you get to push your mortgage. I mean, how do you deal with all of that, Ken, in your company?
Well, we are dealing with it all. We have Freddie and Fannie loans on the majority of the portfolio, and but there's a couple things. One, we're involved at a national level with the National Multi-Housing Council, the Urban Land Institute, and of course on a local level, the Multi-Housing and the Texas Apartment Association, et cetera. So everybody's dealing with the same thing at the same time. So there's a tremendous amount of communication around all of this. And so, yes, it's true that there's a no eviction policy, for example, in place, but it doesn't say that people don't have to pay. And it doesn't say that they're not obligated based on the terms of the lease, period. And so, what we've done is, obviously we're going to follow that no eviction policy, but it doesn't mean that we can't, start to be proactive on collecting the rent and communicating with these people and finding out where they are. There are very few amount of people, Tom, that are just saying, screw you, and we don't have to pay rent, because, there's a lot of misinformation out there. They believe that they don't have to pay. It's only 4 months. And so the truth is, as I told you in the beginning, we don't really evict many people anyway. And you're right. You brought up a really interesting point. Like, why would we evict these people? Why would we have them move out? I go, we're not going to rent anyway right now. We're basically shut down on the rental side for, 60, 90 days. I'd rather have a body in there, help them out. Even if they skip after 60 or 90 days and they owe us, I would rather actually do that for them, and rather than have a vacancy. So back to the humanitarian and the empathy thing. But most of these people are communicating with us, but we're following that. And then we have had, on a number of instances, conversations with our lenders around forbearance. My partner, as you know very well, just texted me while we were talking, said, "Hey, I just got off the phone with American Bank. We got good news." So we're constantly working on these forbearance things, because as a landlord, if people don't pay, we can't pay. And the CARES Act came out and protected the tenants first, and then but when they got all their money in May and April, Tom, it helped us a lot. A lot of those people use that for rent, so we don't really see it as a big issue.
Oh, that's good to hear. So one thing I've noticed as you've been talking, Ken, is that it appears to me that you treat this business as a relationship business, both with your tenants as well as with your lenders and with your investors. Would you just for a minute talk about how important the relationships are in being a landlord.
Yeah, well, it's everything. Again, I think it all starts with the tenant. No tenants, no property. And so so we, as I've talked a lot about that, and I still believe that. I think that these tenants are the reason that we're all in business, and we need to provide the best thing that we can. On the lender side, it's a very different relationship. Ross and I, well, for a couple of reasons. One, lenders lend to companies that have teams, and like yourself, and so this is why we say business is a team sport. So because we have a team of people, and we're dealing with the situation like we are, this is what lenders want to see. They're like, hey, this is a company that's being super proactive. It's got all these initiatives going on. So we're communicating with our lenders on all of this stuff, what our collections have been, where our struggles are, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we're again, I'm fully transparent, Tom. I'm not, burying my head in the sand and pretending like, the people aren't paying. So we're fully communicating. And then from there, depending on the lender or the bank, the truth is they're very different, Tom. I mean, Wells Fargo is different than American Bank and different than, First Bank. And, they're all very different. And so each one requires a different conversation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so some of them, want, reforecasting and rebudgeting, and, we're doing that. It's, so there's all these scenarios that we have. And then on the investor side, as from getting our investor letters, we've been fully transparent. We decided to hold the first quarter distributions, which was honestly, it was painful for me to do because we actually had a great first quarter.
Sure.
And I mean, I was like, well, okay, but you got to remember where we were at the end of March. We were like,
Right.
we don't know whether we're going to collect rent in April and May. And, we haven't seen June yet. So we're going to do it just as a reserve. The good news is, Tom, is that money's still on high ground. It's still the investors. It's not mine. It's the investor money. And, the majority of the investors were completely had understood. And honestly, it was less. I think it was 5 or 6 out of, close to 1,000 investors that, were in disagreement. So we felt very good about that decision. And, I just worked through those issues with some of those people, and mostly they were other issues that they had. And, and so, but now here we are in April and May after, majority collections are done in April, of course. And now, we're almost done through May. And we've done much better than we thought we were going to do. Plus we got our PPP money. So that's been a blessing because, we've been able to use that for payroll. And so we're going to actually, we're going to land a lot softer than we thought we were going to. And so we'll be able to now, release some of that first quarter distributions soon as a result of, now that we're through 60 days into this. So for us, it's just we've been trying to over communicate. And, we communicate once a week. So to the investors as well. And we have a full-time person that basically handles any and all investor inquiries. So, that's part of also the business. When you raise capital, you have responsibility on communication and transparency to the people that give you the money.
Yeah, for sure. And I find it's interesting. I'm listening to you talk about holding that first quarter distribution, right? So I'm very fortunate. Like you, I have a great partner. And like you, I have a partner who's very conservative when it comes to money because I'd spend it. And so what we did basically the same thing in our company. We said, look, we're not making distributions. What I'm finding, and I'm interested in your thoughts on this, is that the people who were well capitalized have weathered this just fine, because then they're able to do, when you're well capitalized, then you're not worried about, okay, am I going to run out of money next week? And instead, what you're worrying about is, okay, how do I make money? And that's a very different energy about making money versus protecting yourself and worrying about going out of business, don't you think?
Oh my gosh, yes, it's a really, really good point. And I knew when we got, out of the hundreds and hundreds of emails that we sent out and letters to the investors, I knew literally it was, you can count them on one hand. I obviously know who these folks are, and they had their own thing going on, and I felt
Yeah.
bad for them. But we're not going to release a distribution just to help out their personal financial situation. The even though I wish that I could, because then I would have to do it for for the rest of the folks, not just to make a one-off deal. And so this has a lot to do. I had a conversation with Robert yesterday, as you know. He sends probably 2 or 3 YouTube videos to us a day, and
Yep.
texts and calls us, multiple times a day. I had a conversation with him last night for about an hour, and he said the for the rich it's money, and for the wealth it's time. It's a big difference. I said, "Where'd you learn that?" He said, "From Buckminster Fuller." He said, you know, the rich measure their success in money, and the wealth measure their success in time. And so you can see the difference, I think, in those two types of people. If you're, and this is exactly why we teach at Rich Dad is, if you can figure out a way to generate enough passive income to be financially free and not have to rely on next week, next month, income or commission or paycheck, then you're personally going to be in a good financial situation. You don't have to dig into savings, even though I advocate that you have savings, just to survive.
No, I like that. I like that. So thank you, Ken. This has been absolutely perfect. So if you could just, what are like 2 or 3 things that you would suggest any landlords who might be struggling, any people who are thinking of, should I be a landlord? Any suggestions for them at this point?
Well, first of all, there's no better time to be a landlord. I know that sounds contrarian, but if you just think about it, because I'm actually doing a video later today on where I think this is all going to end, and where we're going to land by the end of 2020. I personally believe that we're going to have 10 million people still unemployed, at least. And so it's going to be, we started off in February at 5.3. And I think this is a net 10, so we're going to be actually probably closer to 15 million people to get back to the 5.3 that we usually have. There'll be a plus 10. And so those people are going to be struggling a little bit. Now, it's going to depend on the government, and the stimulus and the money that is thrown around and all that kind of stuff. But, that's another topic another time. There are going to, we are moving to a nation of renters. That's the point. And so those people, they're not going to be buying houses. They're going to be doing a lot of things. But they're probably not going to be buying houses if they don't have any work.
Good point.
So yeah, I believe that there's the best thing you can do is get really, really educated, and what I call, don't catch a falling knife. In other words, don't jump in now, because we haven't seen the mortgage defaults. You're going to have housing defaults, you're going to have retail center defaults, you're going to have apartment default, you're going to have commercial office default, you're going to have the regional malls default, all that stuff. The prediction is half the businesses in the malls aren't going to reopen. I saw something yesterday on CNN. One economist said they expect 42%. This is a big number, that won't return to work. Well,
Wow.
if you just take a look at that, that's close to 13 million people. So whatever the number is, we can debate on that all day long. But the point is, it's going to be big, and we are heading into a nation of renting. But you want to be careful not to buy too soon, and that's why I say don't catch a falling knife. If you own something right now, you have to figure out a way to get cash, if you're and keep what you have, because it's going to be gold later. And you want to do anything and everything you can, and that could be through partner cash calls, which I've had to do. On that resort I own, we did a partner
Right.
cash call 45 days ago. We didn't get any PPP money. We were mandated to close our restaurant and our resort, and so we had a bunch of employees, a lot of them actually, and no income, and so we did a cash call. So that was one way. Another way is to obviously apply for any kind of grants that you can find, and find ways for some kind of assistance, financially. And and this is why, this is part of being a landlord, in my opinion, is to have reserves and to have liquidity for these kinds of events. I went through this in 2008. Then it was a banking crisis, and the government funded the banks. But now it's obviously a virus, and the government's telling us we have to be closed, and so they're funding the people. And so we're going to get into a very inflationary time, I think, because in '08 the money went to the banks, and it sat in the banks, but nobody was borrowing because of exactly what I'm about to tell you. Is that why would you borrow and buy something when prices are going down? So that's why we didn't see inflation in 2008, is that prices were deflating. Asset prices were deflating, and while the money was coming into the economy at the same time. And so that's why we've seen inflation recently, because as that money, and a lot of those banks paid that money back. So it was that TARP money. So I do believe that we're going to see inflation, and what you want to be in is hard assets. You want to be able to hedge inflation, and so if you can hold on to that and figure out a way to do that, work with your tenants. It might be a rough year for you, but you want to do some discounts in rents. You want to do some 1 month freeze on a 12-month leases. You want to work with these people. You want to do whatever you can to keep what I would consider the gold in the properties, in the retail centers, in the malls, whatever it is, and just do the best that you can, and try to stop that revenue loss.
I like it. Thank you. So Ken McElroy, MC Companies. We know we can find you at mccompanies.com. Any place else we can find you, Ken? You seem to be all over the place.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, well, I've been doing these. It's been great. I mean, the one thing that's been nice for me, Tom, is we're doing all these Zoom calls. I'm doing them from my house, and I'm having time to do these videos up on YouTube. I just did a video. It had over 300,000 hits in like 10
that's
days.
Awesome.
Yeah, so we're doing videos on YouTube. I've got kenmcelroy.com, where we have a bunch more stuff, for real estate professionals and investors and things like that. And I'm just trying to produce whatever I can based on all our teachings, Tom. I mean, you and I have been doing this together, and we're just trying to educate.
No, I appreciate that. The reality is that when we get more financial education like this, we're always going to make way more money and pay way less tax. We'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone.
You've been listening to the Wealth Ability Show with Tom Wheelwright. Way more money, way less taxes. To learn more, go to wealthability.com.